We were leaving the flea market as my little brother Ryan was admiring his new Pokemon cards that my mom had just brought for him. Me, on the other hand, had my to-go box of barbecue that I was so excited to sink my teeth into.
Did you two have fun?
My mom asked happily as she sprayed her new perfumes. We smiled and nodded in agreement. Although we weren't as rich as other people in our big town, we were happy for the things we had. And on the weekends, our mom would save some money out of her paycheck so that the following week we could spend a day together, either going out to eat or going to the flea market, which was our favorite. As we were closing in on our car, we heard someone whisper in a raspy voice.
Do you want to buy a dog?
We turned around, only to find an elderly lady sitting down with her head bowed low looking at what seemed to be a box of furry creatures. On closer inspection, we realized that they were dogs, or they seemed to be. Something was a little off about them, but I assumed there was some new breed that I've just never seen yet.
Guys, let's go.
My mom demanded, as she did not like us talking to strangers. Mom, can we please get one? Ryan pleaded. He gave her those puppy dog eyes that always won her over. My mom looked kind of annoyed, but she looked back at the old lady.
How much for one, ma'am?
My mom asked, expecting it to be more than she could afford.
$10.
The elder lady said while smiling with her yellow and rotted teeth. My mom and I stood there in shock, realizing how cheap they were, as Ryan didn't know much about high and low prices yet, since he was only in first grade and barely knew how to do math. The elder lady analyzed my mom's confused glance.
I just want them to have good homes. I don't really care about the money. I've seen people treat them awfully and throw them in the trash like they were nothing more than garbage.
She stated with her head still bowed low.
I'll take one.
My mom asked impatiently. The elderly woman moved the box toward our direction, as my mother pulled out a $10 bill and handed it to the elderly woman. This one, Ryan said while holding an adorable puppy in his hands. As I took a closer look, I noticed that the puppy had what seemed to be a pink scar under his left eye. I pointed it out to Ryan, thinking it was cool. That's the perfect name. How about Scar? Ryan said as Scar licked his cheek.
Please make sure you feed it 5 times a day.
The elderly lady said with wide eyes. My mom nervously smiled and thanked the elderly lady before leaving.
You better take good care of him.
My mother told Ryan and I as she gave us a stern look. I will, Mommy. Hey Ben, do you want to hold him? Ryan asked me. Sure, why not? I replied as I grabbed Scar for the first time as we got in the car. Scar was adorable and playful. For most of the car ride home, he brought himself in my shirt. We made it home and I brought him into Ryan and I's room and laid him down on Ryan's bed. As I admired him and I quickly realized things about Scar that were insanely odd. I noticed that instead of 4 fingers on his paw like every other dog, he had 6, along with insanely sharp claws that burrowed themselves in his skin once he was relaxed. I looked at his mouth, which was slightly open as he slept, and I noticed that he did not have teeth, but small holes in his gums where his teeth should be coming from. As I touched his gums for further inspection, I only realized that his teeth protruded from the holes in his gums, but they were insanely sharp like needles, as he snarled, although he was still sound asleep. I ignored it since I didn't know much about dogs. I left the room and I was greeted by my mother, who was leaving for work for the day.
All right, you two. I'll be back around 10. I left a water bowl out for Scar. And Ben, keep a close eye on your brother.
She said. She gave us both a kiss on our forehead, and she left. As Scar slept, Ryan and I played video games. We played for hours until Scar woke up. Scar woke up and jumped off Ryan's bed, and instead of landing on all fours and walking on all fours, he instead used his hind legs. I stood there in shock, as it seemed natural for him. Ryan stood there in shock also. We have to show Mommy when she gets home, Ryan shouted excitedly. I agreed. Scar made a cry and I assumed he was hungry, so I went to the refrigerator, and Scar quickly followed. I opened it up since we didn't have dog food yet, and as I did, Scar pounced at the burger patties that were left over from last night's dinner. Scar, no, don't, I yelled. But before I could finish, Scar's needle-like teeth and claws protruded from his fur and gums, as he quickly tore open the plastic and devoured the beef patties. There were only 4 in there that were for Ryan and I, but I guess a PB&J would also work. Bad boy, I said sternly. Scar sat down and looked up at me with his puppy dog eyes that made me feel bad. Well, you're just a puppy, I said. I grabbed some water and I poured it into his bowl as he happily licked away. I walked back into my room only to find Ryan asleep on his bed. I laughed a little. I went back to play on my game, but an hour later, I heard growling and snarling that sounded like a huge beast was in my kitchen. I grabbed a baseball bat that Ryan had next to his baseball gear, but as I grabbed it, the sounds all of a sudden stopped. I slowly walked into the kitchen only to find the mutilated remains of a cat, and all of our bologna, salami, and frozen ground beef was scattered across the kitchen floor while slowly being drenched in the cat's blood. I then realized that our side door was wide open, along with a trail of blood coming from outside. Damn stray dogs, I yelled, assuming that we had accidentally left the side door cracked open, and a stray dog lurked his way into the house and ransacked our fridge, and he left his disgusting gift. Not to clean this mess up, I yelled. I closed the door and I turned back around only to notice Scar hiding under the chairs. I must have scared him with my yelling, I thought. It's okay, come here buddy, I said as Scar quickly scurried toward me on his hind legs. I quickly noticed that Scar was covered in meat and blood. I assumed that the dog had attacked him after he tried scaring it away, which is why he was hiding. Let's go get you cleaned up, buddy. I brought him to our bathroom and I made some warm bath water before putting Scar in. I made sure it was low enough so that he doesn't drown or anything as I washed him up. I also looked at his wounds. Well, I looked at 4 wounds to be exact, but I realized that they were gone, or nothing was there. There were no wounds on his body. I ran to go clean up the mess outside and in the kitchen as Scar soaked into the tub. I finished after 20 minutes and I ran back into the bathroom only to be surprised and shocked that the bath water was completely gone, although the stopper was still inside. Scar sat there soaked in water while looking at me with his head cocked to the side. I just shook my head, not giving it further thought as I grabbed the towel and dried Scar. My mother came home shortly after and I informed her of what happened.
Next time, make sure all of the doors are closed.
My mom said sternly. I agreed. Scar laid there in the living room as he slowly dozed off. I picked him up and I walked back into my room to go to sleep after. I put Scar on the end of Ryan's bed as he still slept peacefully. I got in my bed and I eventually dozed off. I slept peacefully until I was interrupted by an agonizing scream and then a loud crunch and snap. I thought I was having a nightmare until I followed the screaming, and I was met by my mom who was looking outside our living room window, which lets us see through some parts of the neighborhood.
Oh my god, what is that thing?
My mother whispered softly in horror. I ran to the window and I accidentally startled her.
Jeez, don't scare me like that.
She said, relieved. Then she pointed as she shivered in horror. I looked through the window and I almost pissed myself at what I saw. I saw a deformed and huge beastly creature going door to door ripping people to shreds as body parts flew across the streets and blood sprayed onto windows. It was literal hell. I was quickly broken out of my trance as a man's decapitated head flew through our window, striking me in the shoulder, as glass also fell into the floor. The creature turned toward our direction with its glowing red eyes, but also under his left eye, was a pink scar, the same pink scar that Scar had. My realization was confirmed once I ran into the room and I saw that Scar was nowhere to be found, as Ryan still slept peacefully throughout all this chaos. I was surprised that he didn't wake up from all the screaming and commotion. My mom came running into our room as she slammed it and locked the door.
Our house is next.
My mom said in tears. Ryan finally woke up as my mother hugged us tightly.
I love you.
She said, trying to smile. Before I could answer back, I started thinking about the elderly lady and how we could have never just brought Scar home or whatever that thing is. But one thing hit me hard as I thought about it, and I realized that this was all my fault. As I recalled the last thing the elderly lady said,
Please make sure you feed it 5 times a day.
our front door creaked open, and there were then heavy footsteps and growling. My heart started beating so hard to the point where my head started pounding. I felt my mom and Ryan shake as we hugged each other tightly, as Ryan was still asking us what was going on. The steps got closer to our door, then the steps stopped and the door unlocked somehow and creaked open as my mother's eyes widened in disbelief.
How did it open the door?
She whispered shakingly. I was accepting my fate and expecting to see that beefy creature walk in, but to our surprise, a small furry creature walked in. It was Scar. Scar jumped onto the bed and slowly burrowed himself into my shirt, like nothing happened at all, also staining my white t-shirt with blood. The thing that scares me the most is not that I know Scar isn't a dog, or that he slaughtered every single neighbor we had. It's that we don't have any idea what this thing is.